in this video, we're going to be moving into 3 dimensions, so get hyped. Knowing the things that are covered in this video will basically open the door for you to start modeling whatever your heart may desire, so get ready for that. Every 3-dimensional part that you make has to start in 2 dimensions, so let's just begin with a basic shape, all right? Let me start a sketch, and I'm gonna just make a quick rectangle, put it on the origin here. Let's make this a square, 10 inches by 10 inches. And I'll zoom out so we can see it. And there we go. We have our square. Let me finish the sketch. Zoom out. Alrighty. Now that we have this 2-dimensional shape, we can begin pulling it into the 3rd dimension by creating what's called an extrusion, right? And that can be found up here on the top left with this extrude button. So, okay, it's already selected my face. Yeah. So essentially what it does is it takes that shape that you drew and it pulls it into space and it creates a prism out of it. So as you can see here, it's created a rectangular prism that is 1 inch in width. So if I wanted to, I could make this 100 inches and make this super, super long. Zoom out. Or as you just saw, I can make it super, super small and make it into a tiny thin sliver like this. So adjusting this distance will change how far you pull it into space. And then you can make it go the opposite direction by flipping it. So now it is extruding behind the plane. And you can also do symmetric. So let's say I wanted this to be a full cube. So I can put in distance to be 10. And now, as you see, the plane is in the middle and you have 5 inches going left and 5 inches going right. And another thing you can do is you can do asymmetric, where it'll now give you 2 distances to choose from. So this distance A will be from the front, as you can see. So let's say I wanted this to be 3 inches. And I wanted this to be 7 inches. So I still have the cube because they add up to 10, but now the plane is in the middle, or not exactly the middle, but it's 3 inches in from this side, this plane, and 7 inches in from this plane. Yeah. So in addition to creating a solid object with the extrude button, you can also cut into an object. So let me finish with this really quick. And then let me start a sketch on this face of the object. All right, let me center that. Yeah, so I'm gonna drop a circle on the plane really quickly. There we go. So generally you're gonna want to constrain this, but I am just doing this quickly. So I'm just gonna leave it as is. Yeah. So let's exit that. And now we have our sketch onto this face of the cube, right? And now what happens if I try to extrude this drawing of the circle, right? Well, I can press extrude and there we go. It recognizes that I want to extrude that circle, right? But what happens if I were to switch the direction it goes in? So instead of coming off the cube, it goes into the cube. Well, in that case, it would cut through the cube. And so it leaves a gaping hole in the cube. Yeah. So not only does the extrude button help you make 3D objects, but it can also help you cut through material. Yeah. So again, you can choose how deep this hole is by adjusting the distance. Yeah. Let me go to this face now. Let me start a sketch on this. So there is actually another way to make a hole. So let me throw down a point and let me center this point. So I'm going to constrain this, let this be 5 inches, then also constrain it to this side and let this be 5 inches as well. So now it's constrained to be within the middle of the cube. Let me finish my sketch and center that. There we go. So if you look along the top ribbon, you can also see that there's something called a hole, right? So if we click on hole, okay, I think it's already selected, yeah. So it's already selected. And now, as you can see, we already have a hole. And this hole button is super helpful because there's a lot of things you can do with it. So you can choose how far in you want it to go. You can choose the width of the hole or the diameter of the hole. So let's say I wanted this to be 5 inches. I wanted it to be a super big hole. Again, you can change the direction. You can change the angle at which you're drilling in. So now it leaves like a little cone. Yeah, and there's also a lot of other buttons here. These are especially useful if you're trying to create like an opening for like a lot of like weirdly shaped bolts and screws. But yeah, so that was, oh yeah, and there's also these other options. So there's termination, which is distance. There's through all, which means it goes through everything that's in its path. And then there's also to, where I can choose to come through all the way to this face. So let's say I had more stuff in the back over here. I can choose to go through this plane only instead of everything else. Yeah, so that was hole. And now I'm going to quickly cover what fillets and chamfers are. So if you look up at the top ribbon, here we have fillet and here we have chamfer. You can probably tell what they're going to do based off their little icons, but I'll give you a little bit of a demonstration. Essentially what they do is they help to modify edges. Fillets are super helpful in that they help round off edges and they make things smoother. So let's say I wanted to round off this edge. Well, I can tap that edge and now it is rounded. Well, that's really small. So let me make that a little bit bigger. We can select the radius for which we want to round it. So let's say I wanted it to be 0.5 inches. That's still a little bit too small. So let's make that 3 inches. So that's a lot more noticeable, right? Now we have a smooth rounded edge. And this is super helpful in that you can, let's say you're 3D printing something. With filleting, you can reduce the amount of material that's going to be used for whatever you're making. And it also helps to make the object a lot lighter. Yeah, so that is fillets. And then chamfers is something really similar to fillets, where we basically select another edge that we want to chamfer. So let's say we select that edge and we want the distance to be 3 inches as well. So 2 inches. So as you can see, instead of it being rounded like we did with the fillet, chamfer essentially cuts a section off. And there's a lot of things you can do with this. If you mess with these other buttons, you can change the angle at which the fillets are coming in. So you could come in at an angle like this instead of being perfectly at a 45-degree angle. Yeah, so there's a lot of things you can do with that. Yeah, so that's essentially it. Yeah, so that's extrusions, that's holes, that's fillets and chamfers. Yeah,